Hello, welcome and an excellent evening, and today I want to talk about this again. It's a Roland MT32 synthesizer module which you can use to make music or play video games, and a lot of video games back in the late 80s, early 90s supported this thing. Most importantly, titles like King's Quest from version 4 onwards and many other Sierra games, but also Lucasfilm games, etc. were known to use this to very great extents and make very nice soundtracks for their games. But back in the day it was a rather expensive device to own, and nowadays it's also very sought after. There are emulations now based on the Raspberry Pi, which are very nice, so you can still get your hands on some of those. This is my rough and beat up module that I bought from a musician who used it really to make music on stage. Has holes drilled in from a rack mount, I think, or something. But yeah, and usually you would say, yeah, these were used mainly with the IBM PC, with MS-DOS, with these games, and you would certainly be right. And you would probably also be using this to a lesser extent with an Atari ST, probably more for making music, but probably there are also a couple of Sierra titles that supported this on the Atari ST. And the ST was special in that it already had a MIDI interface built in. Whereas on the PC you needed a MIDI interface card such as the Roland MPU-41, for which I have somewhere here the breakout box. But I don't have the card itself. I do have the LAPCI, which is related to this thing and a synthesizer on its own. But that's all a whole different topic. I want to talk about the possibility of what if this had been used back in the 80s and 90s with the Amiga. And I have one right here. This is my slightly yellowed Amiga 500. I also have the black one right here that I showed off in a different video. And this is a very nice Amiga. It also has a very yellowed case, as I said, but it's a classic 500 with a 512K RAM expansion, so it has 1 megabyte of RAM. It has the enhanced Agnos in there. I put that in at some point. And it has a lot of ports on the back side. It has video, it has power, it has a parallel port, serial, external floppy, and then audio and joystick ports. The audio here comes from the Paula chip in the Amiga 500. I'm going to put this away because it's heavy. And the Paula can play back 4 channels of digitized sound at something around 28 kilohertz or something. So everything up to 14 kilohertz, I guess, due to the sampling theorem, can be played back, all in 8-bit quality. It sounds nice, and the demo scene producers can tweak this thing to produce awesome music, but it sounds very different to the MT32, which is a true professional musical instrument with much more than 4 channels. It's also stereo, but it has, I don't know, 16 polyphonic sounds or something? I don't know. Definitely more. I might look it up and put it somewhere here in the video. But there's no MIDI port on this. And if the games don't support it, what are you going to do? However, the games from the later Sierra era, something like King's Quest V, The Legend of Robin Hood, or Leisure Suit Larry 5, and this is actually the Amiga version here, do support the Roland MT32. The Sierra games were always very modular. On the PC they supported multiple graphics standards and something like at least half a dozen different sound cards, because the PC sound market was very fragmented and heterogeneous. So on the Amiga, the installation program for these games includes 2 drivers always, Amiga Sound and MT32. And I think I've seen almost no one use the MT32 sound option, because I guess if the sound system costs as much as the main computer, nobody would buy that, and the Amiga had decent sound. But how does it compare? How does the Amiga sound for these games compare to the MT32? That's what we want to find out now. And my opinion is actually that the Sierra ports and the Lucasfilm ports of their adventure games actually massively underutilize the Amiga platform. I think these games could have been much better on the Amiga platform because they are usually rather slow. The graphics don't look as nice as they could on the Amiga. They were converted in a very, well, simple fashion and don't utilize all the graphics modes that the Amiga has to offer. And the sound also sounds rather hollow. And with Lucasfilm games, for example, Monkey Island 2 or Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis, a lot of music is missing completely from the game that you actually can experience in the PC version, which has a very nice sound support, even on a cheap AppLib card. But now let's go over to the Black Amiga 500 because it has the ACA 500 accelerator card with the compact flash disk, so we don't have to swap around any disks. And also have a look at the MIDI cable, because how do we connect that? And that's actually a pretty interesting thing, and you can buy this kind of MIDI cable, and I guess you could probably buy that back in the day too, I think, or make your own one, and then experience what the Amiga could have sounded like if more games would have supported the MT32. Very quick look here. This is the cable. You can order it from, I don't know, I will probably put a link down in the video description. It is called the KA12 and it connects to the serial port of the Amiga, and it has two MIDI DIN plugs here on this end, and it says in and out. So black is in, red is out, and you will have to attach this in exactly the opposite fashion. The red out goes obviously to the in of the MT32, and the in goes to the out port, obviously. You only need the in connected here on the right if you want to play music. If you want to record, you also need this one here, obviously. Depending on your setup, I think. I'm not a musician, I don't have a keyboard or anything, but this is how you wire the MIDI stuff up. And this is basically it. You will also have to attach, of course, some cables with phone jacks on this side here. And then attach this one here to the serial port of your Amiga while it's switched off, obviously. Otherwise you might destroy your equipment. So don't do that. Very quick look. There's the disk drive port, there's the serial port, and this whole thing here easily gets into this here, and there's also some screws to make sure that it doesn't fall off or anything like that. And then you're ready to go. So here we are on the Amiga, and here's my folder of Sierra games. Not all the games support the MT32. The older ones like Leisure Suit Larry 2 or 3 or King's Quest 4 I didn't get to work, or Hero's Quest, because they are still based on the SCI 0 engine, which is the older engine with only 16 color graphics and no icons. Space Quest 3 is actually something special, and it does support in some versions the MT32. I got it to work because it's using a weird engine in between SCI 0 and SCI 1 from what I understand. But let's have a look at the setup, for example, for King's Quest 5, which is probably a popular choice. For setting this up, you just click on the install program, and there you see the MT32 driver and the Amiga sound driver. Most people probably would never bother to change any of that, but if you want to change that, you simply click on the MT32 driver and click update. And that's already everything you need to do. Then you can click exit and you're done. And after that, you can just start the game and enjoy the music. I will now play you a couple of intro sequences from a couple of the games, and we will switch back and forth between the Paula sound and the MT32 sound, so we can compare how they actually sound on their own. As usual with the MT32 sounds, this actually takes quite a while to start up, even though we are running here on an accelerator board with 20 megahertz or something, plus we're running from compact flash without floppy disk access. But you can see the Conquest logo here on the MT32 display, so all the usual stuff that you're used to from the PC actually works. And yeah, after roughly 30 to 40 seconds or something, the intro will start and the game will continue. And that's already it for this video. I think I showed you a couple of the Sierra games that do support the MT32 on the Amiga. There are a couple of more games, obviously. I think maybe there are 24 all in all. And I think there is basically no other company that supported the MT32 officially. There are probably a couple of MIDI sequencers, although the Atari ST obviously was much more prominent in doing MIDI, all kinds of MIDI stuff, due to the built-in MIDI interface. But wouldn't it have been great back in the 80s, early 90s, if the Amiga was coupled with such a nice looking synthesizer, maybe in this black case? I think this is like a match made in heaven, basically. I think this is gorgeous. And while the Paula was a good sound chip and the demo scene year after year shows off what you can do with the Paula, it was definitely very limited, especially if you didn't have a lot of chip RAM. The original A500 only had 512K RAM, expandable to 1 megabyte using the trapdoor expansion, but it would still stick at 512K chip RAM, which would be used by the Paula and by the graphics chip, etc. So very limited sample capabilities, very limited sound if you didn't really spend a lot of time optimizing. And the MT32 obviously was a hybrid device using a little bit of a wavetable, a little bit of linear arithmetic synthesis, and was able to produce much nicer sounds actually. But probably, I guess, the Amiga 500 and the MT32 were, I guess, roughly the same price when you bought it. And this was definitely overkill back in the day for a home computer, let's say. So I think the Amiga was the way it was because of the design decisions that the Amiga team did back when they designed the original Amiga 1000. And it was good that way, basically. But I think the Sierra games and the LucasArts games could have sounded and looked so much better on these machines. And one of the aspects would have been a better sound support. Maybe not with the MT32, but with more clever programming on the Amiga side. I think something better could have been possible. The PC sidestepped this. If you didn't have the money for the MT32, you could take the AdLib, and there was not much memory requirements or compute requirements to drive the AdLib, and the OPL2 FM sound was fine if you programmed for it, like Monkey Island did. Monkey Island sounds great on an AdLib. But the sample-based music that you could get out of the tracker programs on the Amiga did have their own appeal, I think. So leave your comments, I think, towards, is the Amiga and the MT32 a good match? Should more games have supported the MT32? What do you think? Is the Paula better? Is the MT32 better? Are they just completely different beasts? Leave your opinion, share, like, subscribe, all the usual stuff. And yeah, if you want to support me, you can find all the links in the video description. Other than that, I'm gonna say until the next video. Bye.